Hi guys, sorry to interrupt your viewing, but please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you.
It was Christmas Eve, and the house smelled like pine, cinnamon, and that fake kind of joy people microwave into the air when real warmth has long since packed up and left. I just paid for the delivery of the 22-pound turkey that my mom had somehow still managed to complain about. I paid for the tree, the lights, the ornaments, even the ugly-ass inflatable Santa my father insisted was tradition, despite the fact it scared the hell out of the neighborhood kids. I'd bought gifts for everyone, wrapped them myself while Carla, my brother Ethan's wife, sat on the couch scrolling through her phone like she wasn't drowning in her own boredom. I even tossed in a check for Ethan's overdue gas bill, tucked neatly into an envelope he would open later and pretend not to need. This was my role every year. Financial Santa. Emotional landfill. I was the sister who made it and therefore owed them all something for it. Success, apparently, was a family debt you never stop repaying. No husband, no kids, no excuses. I had the time and the means, so why not take care of everyone else's mess? That's how they saw me. Not Rachel. Not the daughter who called when no one called her back. Not the woman who flew out of state on 3 days' notice when Dad had his second stroke. No. I was just the bank. With a pulse. So there we were, table set, wine poured, forced smiles all around. I'd made a joke about burning the pie again, which landed flat like everything else I said that night. Ethan, ever the golden boy, laughed too loudly, mostly to fill the space where connection should have lived. Then he stood up, raised his glass, and delivered the line that cracked the whole thing in two like brittle porcelain under pressure. Christmas, he said, tilting his glass in my direction, isn't for people like you. He said it so calm, like he was quoting a weather forecast. Like I should have nodded along and laughed. The worst part? I didn't even react at first. I looked around the table like maybe someone else heard it differently. Like maybe I'd missed the punchline. But all I saw were my parents. Janice and Howard. My mother sipped her wine like it was a sedative, eyes down. My father? He smirked. He actually smirked, like Ethan had said something clever, like this was a moment they'd rehearsed in some secret family playbook where I was always the joke. And right there, in that heavy, dead silence, I felt something crack open in my chest. Not break. Not shatter. Crack. Quietly. Slowly. Permanently. He meant I wasn't normal. I didn't have the suburban family package, no 2 kids, no husband grilling outside, no Christmas card with all of us in matching sweaters. I was the outlier. The other. The rich aunt. The woman who made them uncomfortable just by showing up and not needing them. And when he said that line, he took all their passive-aggressive digs from the past 10 years and gift-wrapped them into one clean, precise insult. And they nodded. They fucking nodded. I laughed. I actually laughed. Not a real one, though. The kind of laugh you make when you realize the joke isn't just on you. It's always been on you. You were just too busy paying the bills to notice. I stood up, slow and calm, like nothing had happened. I said I was going to the kitchen to check the pie, which none of them actually wanted, and I stepped out of the dining room and into the hallway where I could breathe without swallowing glass. I leaned against the wall and looked at the old photos still framed from decades ago. Ethan at prom, Ethan at graduation, Ethan with his first car that I helped him buy when Mom and Dad couldn't afford it. My photo? The one from my college graduation? It was crooked. Had been for years. No one fixed it. I pulled out my phone. My hands weren't even shaking. That's how I knew I was done. When you cry, there's still a part of you trying to fight. But when you go cold, that's when the real storm hits. I opened my banking app and scrolled through the list of automatic payments I had set up. Ethan's utility bills. My parents' rent. The monthly allowance I sent for their medications, groceries, all the little things they never said thank you for. I didn't cancel anything just yet. I just looked at them. Studied them. Like exhibits in a case, I was finally ready to close. Then I opened a blank group message. I stared at it for a moment, fingers hovering over the screen, heart not racing, just steady. The kind of steady that comes before a fire. You'll all feel this by New Year's. I hit send, walked back to the table, and served the damn pie with a smile so calm it scared even me. The next morning came with the kind of sharp, bitter clarity you only get when a piece of your soul finally detaches for good, like a scab that's been holding on too long and finally gives up under its own weight. The sun was shining in that obnoxious winter way, bright, cold, indifferent, and the silence in my apartment felt heavier than usual, like it was trying to talk me out of what I already knew I had to do. I poured my coffee, didn't add the cinnamon like I normally would, and opened my laptop with the same calm people reserve for flipping a light switch before walking out of a room they're never coming back to. I didn't need a list. I knew it all by heart. Every automatic payment, every wire transfer, every disguised plea for help dressed up as family obligation. First, there was the $1,200 I sent to my parents each month for rent because they couldn't keep up after retirement, despite somehow still managing to afford cable, cigarettes, and that overpriced bottle of wine my father claimed he needed for his blood pressure. Then there was Ethan's car payment, $650 a month for a leased BMW he should never have been approved for in the first place. On top of that, private school fees for Liam and Grace. Not all of it, but enough to keep them enrolled, because the public schools were just too rough and Carla couldn't bear to move again. I'd been quietly paying part of the tuition since their second semester. They never asked directly, no one ever did, but the unspoken expectation had been there since Ethan lost his second job and decided to freelance full-time, which, near as I could tell, meant emailing resumes he never followed up on and blaming the economy for everything but his own ego. So I pulled the plug. I went into every account and started canceling. One by one. The rent subsidy? Gone. Tuition support? Ended with a single click. That car Ethan loved more than his own kids? Hope he enjoys the bus. I left the group chat open while I did it, the message still there like a verdict waiting to be executed. This bank is officially closed. I hadn't added anything else. No long explanation, no plea for understanding, no threat. Just the facts, just the truth. For once, the silence was deafening. No one replied right away, which, honestly, made it feel even more satisfying. They were stunned. They didn't expect me to bite back. That's the thing about always being the dependable one. They confuse your patience for weakness. They think you'll keep showing up, no matter how many times they roll their eyes behind your back or use your kindness as a cushion for their own recklessness. But what they don't understand is that patience has a shelf life. And mine had expired. As I sat there, watching the seconds crawl across my phone screen, I couldn't help but think back to when it all started. Not just the money, but the pattern. I must have been maybe 9 the first time I realized Ethan and I were living 2 different versions of the same childhood. He broke a lamp throwing a baseball in the house, and Mom told him boys would be boys. I spilled juice on the rug and got grounded for a week and told to be more careful, Rachel. He got a new bike when he failed math. I got a lecture when I brought home a B+ in science. He got hugs. I got expectations. They always told me to be grateful, be helpful, be understanding. Ethan needed more help. Ethan struggled. Ethan was sensitive. I was told not to be dramatic, not to take things personally, not to rock the boat. I was the strong one. That's what they called it, like it was some kind of reward, when really it was just a leash they used to drag me back whenever I tried to live for myself. And you know what I realized? I've spent over $70,000 a year helping them. That's like almost $500,000 in 3 years. $500,000 to buy myself a seat at a table that still made me feel like an outsider. That's what it cost to be tolerated. Not loved. Tolerated. Around noon, my phone finally buzzed. Ethan. I let it ring. Then again. I watched his name flash across the screen, thumb hovering over the decline button, before I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, the text came. Short. Too short. Can we talk? And that's when I realized he still didn't get it. He still thought I owed him a conversation, an explanation, maybe even an apology for embarrassing him by finally saying no. Because that's the Carter family way: pretend nothing's wrong, sweep it under the rug, and expect the woman to fix it. But this time the woman is done sweeping. This time, the mess is theirs to live in. And I'm just getting started. It took about 4 days before the first real consequence showed up at my doorstep. Not a phone call or a confrontation, not even a slammed door or shouted insult, but something far more difficult to look at and infinitely harder to ignore. Silence, followed by fear, and then the soft, clumsy echo of regret. Not mine, though. Theirs. Or at least, the version of regret people like my family express when their comfort starts slipping through their fingers and reality comes knocking, dressed like a utility bill with no one left to intercept it. The first message was from my mother, short and strange, almost clinical in tone, like she was writing a memo and not begging her daughter to pay the heating bill. Just wondering if the January rent has been sent. The landlord says nothing's come through. That was it. No mention of Christmas. No apology. No acknowledgement of what had happened, or what had been said at the dinner table, or that I'd finally drawn a line and dared to leave it standing. Just a nudge. A polite reminder. A woman so used to the money appearing that she'd convinced herself it came from nowhere, like a check that grew legs and walked into her mailbox every month out of habit, not love. I didn't reply. Not because I wanted her to suffer, but because I didn't know how to explain, again, that love without respect doesn't mean a damn thing, especially when you've been buying both for so long that you start to forget which was missing first. I told myself to hold the line. That was the phrase my therapist had given me. Hold the line, Rachel. Hold it until you can't anymore, and then hold it longer. She was good, my therapist. Wore clunky boots and drank iced coffee in January, always had a pen tucked behind her ear like she was ready to edit my life mid-sentence. She didn't let me get away with soft answers. When I told her what happened on Christmas Eve, she didn't blink. So now what? She asked, like we both didn't already know. I told her I wanted to feel powerful, finally. I told her I wanted to stop being the one who always absorbed the blows and kept moving. I told her I wanted them to understand that I wasn't a resource, I was a human being. But I also told her the truth, that when I closed the accounts and hit send on that group text, I didn't feel powerful. I felt sick. I didn't sleep that night. Or the next. And now, watching my family spin without me, I couldn't tell if it was grief or guilt keeping me awake. Then came Carla. A message, this time not so clinical, not so cold. She didn't use Ethan's phone. She messaged me from her own. That's how I knew it was real. Rachel, I know we haven't always been close, and I know this probably isn't my place, but the kids are scared. They don't understand what's happening. Ethan won't talk to them. I don't know what to do. She didn't ask for money, which somehow made it worse. She was asking for help without asking for anything concrete. She was throwing a rope without knowing if I was still willing to catch it. And that's when the image hit me. Grace, 7 years old, standing in front of the Christmas tree, eyes wide and confused, wondering why the pile of gifts had shrunk, why her mother was on the verge of tears, why her dad kept going outside to smoke, even though he'd promised to quit. I could see her face so clearly it made my chest ache, because I remember what it's like to be that kid, the one stuck in the middle of adult lies, the one who knows something's broken but doesn't yet have the language to name it. I didn't reply to Carla either. Not because I didn't want to, but because if I did, I wasn't sure I'd stop. If I sent one gift, one check, one apology, I was back in the loop again. Back in the same cycle my therapist had written on a whiteboard 2 months ago. Forgiveness. Insult. Guilt. Repeat. I thought cutting them off would be clean. I thought it would feel like justice. But justice is messier than it looks in movies. Justice, when it's personal, never lands the way you imagine. It sticks to your ribs. It wakes you up at 4 in the morning and whispers names you tried to forget. I started keeping a notebook on my nightstand, jotting down phrases I couldn't say out loud. They never protected me. He never stood up for me. I was the investment they never admitted cashing in. One night I wrote, "Now they can't sleep, and neither can I." And something about seeing those words in my own handwriting made the ache settle a little deeper. 3 days later, I checked my mail. Not email. The real kind. With paper and stamps and handwriting you can't mistake. There it was, tucked between a grocery flyer and a postcard from my dentist, a letter addressed in my father's familiar, blocky scrawl. I turned it over in my hands like it might detonate. I hadn't received a handwritten anything from him since I was in college, when he sent me a 2-line birthday card and misspelled my name. The envelope was heavy, the flap sealed tight like it had been pressed down with purpose. No return address. No date. Just my name, written like it was a dare. I stood there in my hallway, coat still on, bag over my shoulder, staring at it like it might answer questions I didn't know how to ask. I opened it, slowly, and what I found inside wasn't at all what I expected. I sat down on the edge of my couch, still wearing my coat, my keys dangling from one hand and the letter trembling ever so slightly in the other, though I tried to convince myself it was just the cold. The envelope had a weight to it, not just in paper but in something denser, something older, like opening it would be peeling back a wall that had been quietly holding up the roof of my entire childhood. The seal broke with a reluctant sigh, and the folded paper inside came free like it had been waiting for years to be seen again. At first, the tone felt off, not angry, not warm, but formal in that way my father always was when emotions threatened to escape the perimeter of his control. "Rachel," it began. "No dear, no my daughter, just my name, a label, a line drawn between us." I wanted to explain some things. Not because I think you'll understand, but because I think it's time you knew. Already, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. That line, "I think it's time you knew," what the hell had been hidden? The first paragraph read like an apology. There were phrases about how families break in slow motion and how he regretted not speaking up more. He admitted that Ethan could be cruel, admitted that maybe he and Mom had leaned too hard on me over the years because you seemed like the one who could carry it. And for a second, I almost softened. For a second, I felt the possibility of a bridge, shaky but still standing. Then came the turn. "But you've always needed to feel superior, Rachel. Even as a kid. Always had to be the best, always had to win. We didn't stop Ethan because, frankly, we agreed. He said what we've all felt for a long time. You made yourself separate from us, and now you're angry that we noticed." I blinked. Reread it. Once. Twice. My mouth went dry. The words felt surgical, like they'd been sharpened to cut rather than explain. We agreed. Not we made a mistake, not we let him go too far. No, they stood behind him. Behind that toast. Behind that insult. Behind that knife twisted right into my spine under the guise of a holiday tradition. But the next paragraph hit harder. So much harder I had to read it aloud just to believe it was real. "When your grandfather passed, he left a trust. You were both included at first, but after discussing things with the lawyer, we decided Ethan needed it more. We didn't think you'd miss it, not with your career." I swear I stopped breathing. There was no punctuation, no build-up, no sense of awareness for what that sentence actually meant. Like it was just another line in a long, cruel story. My grandfather, my mother's father, had left a trust fund. I was included at first. Then they took me out. Quietly. Deliberately. And gave the whole thing to Ethan. They didn't even tell me it existed. For a long time, I just sat there. Letter in one hand, phone in the other, but not moving. My heart was beating, sure, but it felt mechanical, like something keeping me upright instead of keeping me alive. I read the letter again, scanning for details, names, dates, anything that might help make sense of it, but it was vague, too vague to feel accidental. This wasn't some clerical oversight. This was a choice. A theft. And they hadn't even bothered to lie about it. Just assumed I wouldn't notice. Or worse, that I'd be too proud to ask. I called the one person I thought might give me answers without flinching. His name was Alan Bricker, my dad's old friend from the Masonic Lodge, an estate lawyer who once came to our house wearing a brown suede suit that smelled like cigar smoke and bankruptcy. I hadn't seen him in over 15 years, but I found his office number online, still listed under the same generic title, Family Trust Services Incorporated. The receptionist didn't ask many questions, just said he'd call me back that afternoon. And he did. His voice hadn't changed much, though it wavered a bit when I told him who I was and what I'd just found. At first, he played dumb. I'm not sure I remember all the details, Rachel. It's been so long, but when I asked him outright if there had been a trust fund left by Raymond Corwin for both me and Ethan Carter, the silence was confirmation enough. Eventually, he admitted it. Yes, there was a trust, he said slowly, as if each word might incriminate him. It was divided evenly in the will. But your parents came to me about redirecting the full amount to Ethan. They claimed you were doing very well financially and didn't need it. They asked me to revise the distribution through a family override clause. It's not illegal. It was permitted, but not disclosed, I said. Correct, he said. And I was never told. I assumed they'd handled that part, he replied, but I could hear the guilt threading through his words like mold in wallpaper. I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. Everything started spinning after that: memories, numbers, legal terms I half understood, and all the conversations I'd replayed in my head for years, now taking on a whole new meaning. They hadn't just used me. They'd stolen from me. Taken what I was owed and handed it to a man who once got arrested for drunk driving and blamed the cop for being too aggressive. A man who toasted me out of the family while drinking wine I paid for. A man they still protected at my expense. This wasn't about pride anymore. Or principle. Or emotional closure. This was about money. And theft. And the kind of betrayal that comes with signatures on paper and smiles over dinner. I picked up my phone. Not to text. Not to scream. I didn't want another hollow conversation. I wanted justice. I dialed my lawyer. Let's open a case, I said. And this time my hands didn't shake. There's something uniquely cruel about being asked to attend a family dinner after detonating a landmine beneath everything they'd once taken for granted. The invitation didn't come with a phone call or a text message, but in the form of my mother's nervous voice on my voicemail, saying she hoped we could all sit down like adults and maybe clear the air before things got out of hand. The tone was careful, like she thought if she just rearranged the words right, she could fold the universe back to what it had been before Christmas Eve, before Ethan's little speech, before I closed the financial floodgates, before the letter, the lie, and the bombshell that dropped like an anvil straight through whatever illusions we'd all been clinging to. And I said yes, not because I wanted peace. Not because I believed anything they said could actually undo what they'd done. But because some truths don't belong in silence. Some truths deserve an audience. And this one? This one came with documents, receipts, notarized statements, and a rage so precise it felt surgical. I arrived 10 minutes early. Didn't bring wine. Didn't bring dessert. I brought a manila folder and the kind of composure that makes people nervous, because they can't tell if you're about to forgive them or bury them. They'd prepared dinner. Sure, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans with that weird almond topping they always think makes it fancy. It was all there, perfectly arranged, as if presentation could somehow replace accountability. Everyone was already seated when I walked in. Ethan looked tired and slightly overdressed, like he was trying to look like the kind of man who hadn't just stolen 6 figures from his sister. Carla gave me a small, sad nod, the kind that says, I see you, without actually doing anything useful. My father looked annoyed. My mother looked rehearsed. I sat down, rested the folder on my lap, and waited for anyone, to speak first. But of course, they didn't. Because cowards always hope you'll be the one to break the silence and spare them the burden of starting something they can't finish. So I began. I brought some things, I said calmly, unfolding the flap of the folder with care, like I was opening a gift that none of them wanted, but all of them deserved. Since we're here to clear the air, I figured we should do it properly. Transparently. Honestly. I started with the trust documents. Laid them flat in the center of the table between the mashed potatoes and the salad tongs. Highlighted clauses. Inheritance terms. Signatures. My name, once included. Then not. I didn't need to explain much. The paper did that for me. Then came the bank statements. Proof of the tuition payments, the rent subsidies, the car note Ethan never once said thank you for. I passed them one by one, like a teacher handing out graded exams, each one detailing the quiet generosity they had weaponized for over a decade. Every dollar accounted for. Every excuse exposed. Ethan finally broke first. Of course he did. Jesus, Rachel, what the hell is this? He snapped, voice raised like he'd just caught me stealing from him. Is this supposed to be some kind of show? You want a medal or something for paying a few bills? You said Christmas isn't for people like me, I replied, not even flinching. And you were right. Christmas is for liars, thieves, and cowards who let their daughter pay for their mistakes. My mother's fork clattered against her plate. She covered her face with her napkin, already starting to cry, like tears could erase a signature on a legal document. My father pushed back from the table without a word, stood up slowly like he was too proud to storm out, but too spineless to stay seated. Ethan looked at me like I'd just burned down his entire house. And maybe I had. I didn't ask for your money, he said, fists clenched, jaw twitching. You didn't have to, I shot back. You just lived your life like someone else was always going to clean up after you. And Mom and Dad made sure I'd be the one holding the damn broom. That's when Carla finally spoke. Quietly. Steadily. Like she'd been holding it in for far too long. I knew, she said. About the trust. About the money. I'm sorry. I didn't know how to stop it. And I didn't think it was my place to exactly, I cut in. It was never your place. But it was mine. And they took it from me without blinking. No one said anything after that. We sat there for a few long, impossible minutes, surrounded by half-eaten food, burned bridges, and the kind of silence that follows a gunshot. I stood up slowly, gathered my folder, and walked out without saying goodbye. Not out of drama, not out of pride, but because I meant it this time. There was nothing left to say. Back home, my apartment felt like a hospital waiting room, too clean, too quiet, and full of ghosts that wouldn't make eye contact. I didn't turn on the Christmas lights. I hadn't put up the tree this year. There was no wreath on the door, no sugar cookies in the oven, no holiday movie humming in the background. Just me, just the quiet, and the weight of everything that had finally been said out loud. That's when I saw it on the kitchen counter, a small envelope, sloppily sealed, with crooked handwriting that made my throat close up the second I recognized it. It was from Liam. Inside, a simple, lopsided card. Construction paper, glue, a few glitter smears. And in the middle, in big, uneven letters, I miss you, Aunt Ratch. The spelling was off. The colors were all wrong. But it hit me harder than anything else had. Because he didn't know what sides had been chosen, what money had been stolen, what lies had been carved into the foundation of our family. He just missed me. And I missed him too. Maybe I went too far. Or maybe I finally just stopped pretending I wasn't hurt. Either way, they can't sleep. Neither can I. And maybe that's the closest thing to justice this family will ever get.